Hello people. Um, I want to talk in this video about something which I believe is among the most important issues of our time. It is one of the most important humanitarian issues, geopolitical issues, and ideological issues. In the video I made about the attacks in Paris, I spoke specifically about Islamism. And the predominant focus of my criticism still lies in Islamism. That is violent, organised, ideological, religious violence. So my criticism still lies principally with that sort of Salafi, Wahhabi ideology that causes carnage around the world. But there is something deeper here that I think really needs to be evaluated and candidly discussed. Just for the record, I'm not making this video to provoke. If it does provoke, it's entirely the fault of those who choose to be provoked, but I'm not making it for that purpose. I'm making it to throw out issues there that no doubt other people are doing, but I think there needs to be more and more voices saying these things. I want to talk about Islam itself, the religion. Now, there's a tendency whenever there is an Islamist attack for a certain predictable series of responses. And it's usually along these lines. We condemn the attacks, or I condemn the attacks. I am a Muslim. I condemn the attacks. It is terrible. They are terrorists. They are insulting our Islam. They are un-Islamic. That's one response. Then another might be, the media has to stop defaming Islam. They are terrorists. They have nothing to do with Islam. So the trend basically goes like that. Defensive and in denial. And I have to tell you, I am so utterly fed up with it. As a human being, I am sick to death of the denials and the inhumanity brought about in the name of violent Islamism, and the denials connected to it, I should say. Now, the common sense approach, of course, is that you cannot generalize 1.4, 1.5 billion people. You just can't do that. And I am convinced, and I want to make this very clear, I am convinced that the vast majority of Muslims are normal, decent people. And they're as varied a group of people as any other body of people. You get all sorts of branches of Muslims, all sorts of schools of thought. That you could say the same for any large group. I'm convinced of that. My own personal transactions with Muslims, if you like, I've met quite a lot in my life, and I'm not talking about online, I'm talking about in person. Most of them have been decent, normal people. I've always taken the logic that when I meet somebody for the first time, I give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't care what colour their skin is, I don't care what country they're from, I don't care what religion they have. I give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm civil to everybody that I meet for the first time. I'm talking about normal people here. I wouldn't be civil to Jeremy Kyle, but that's off topic. No, if I'm introduced to a new person, I'm civil to them, because that's the way I would expect to be treated. And I have to say, most of the Muslims I've met in my life have been normal, decent people. But actually that is a distraction, because it is only a minority of far-right extremists who actually hate all Muslims. I do believe that. I think most people don't hate all Muslims. So there is actually a phony victimhood mentality going on here. And in the wake of this Paris attack, something similar is happening to what we saw in the wake of the Sydney attack last year. And that is what I would call a victimhood mentality. Already, there is a Twitter trend, I think it's called Uniting with Muslims, or something along those lines. Now, I'm sure there are examples, whenever there's an Islamist attack, of examples of reprisals, maybe a mosque getting vandalised. And I think that is punitive, and I think it's wrong. I don't think it is a way to combat Islamism. And I will always, always, always condemn violence or intimidation of individual Muslim people. As a fellow human being, I believe they have as much right to live in peace and security as anybody else. However, and this is a very, very important thing, I am adamant that Islam can and should be criticised. And quite frankly, my message to any Muslims who are watching this is, if you cannot differentiate between people and belief, the problem is yours. So if you choose to be offended by people saying that they hate Islam, that's your fault. It's very different from people saying they hate Muslims. That's a critical difference. I believe it is entirely legitimate to hate Islam. Personally, I don't hate Islam, because I think there are some positive aspects to it. But I hate certain aspects of it, and I do believe it is entirely 100% open to criticism. As a concept, it is absolutely should be open to criticism. So should Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism and Judaism, and every religion. But this is a unique problem within Islam. I do believe that, because whilst there is extremists in every religion, I don't believe that any of them are as internationalized as this is. And I don't believe we see the same level of denials. And in part that is because there is simply not as many Christian, Hindu, Buddhist terrorist attacks as there are Islamic terrorist attacks. Now it's about time that we start just speaking the truth. And the problem in a lot of Western liberal democracies, as I see it, is that if you do talk the way that I am talking right now, idiot lefties, quite frankly, will automatically react that you're a fascist. You must belong to the far right. You must be part of a white supremacist group, and that you hate all Muslims. I want to make something very clear to those people. Get your head out of the sand and start to practice what you preach. If you believe in human rights, if you believe in civil liberty, if you believe in freedom of expression, you will support anybody's right to criticize Islam. But instead we have buffoons like Unite Against Fascism in the UK, who would have decent principles in terms of opposing fascism and racism if they weren't so damn inconsistent. Now, they will never vocally criticise Islamism, and I think that is utterly despicable for an organisation that claims to oppose fascism. But anyway, I don't want to sidetrack on this video, because this is specifically about internal Islam itself. I don't want to talk about so much about its apologists, although that is certainly a factor. Let's start with one of the claims that is often made. Islam is perfect, Islam is a religion of peace. Just putting the cigarette back somewhere. Okay, let's think about that for a second. Islam is perfect, Islam is a religion of peace. Let's look at the past 20 years, and I'm not talking just post 9/11, because this did not begin with 9/11. At least in the last 20 years it has escalated in that time, but it's something that's always existed within Islam, which is violence. Muhammad, as the founder of the religion, was a martialized individual. Muhammad was not a pacifist. Let's just get that out of the way up front. The Prophet Muhammad was not a pacifist. Now that's not the same as saying he was a terrible person. I frankly don't know enough about him to comment in detail about the man's life. But let's just stop pretending that Islam is a religion of peace when its founder was a man of war. Let's just be clear about that. The Prophet Muhammad was not a pacifist. This is a historical fact. And whilst I don't know everything about him, I know that to be a historical fact. It's documented. It's well documented. There are many surahs that are highly questionable in their rhetoric. Now the usual response to this is, oh, you're misinterpreting it. Or the rhetoric that's being used is talking about a spiritual struggle, not literal. So at this point I want to talk about some of the surahs that are mentioned. I have a copy of the Holy Quran here. And don't worry, I'm not going to desecrate it, I'm not going to burn it, I'm not going to do anything like that. And incidentally, that sort of thing I don't think that's intelligent. I don't think it's has much value. I have this copy of the Holy Quran. It was given to me when I studied in Wolverhampton. It was an Islam Awareness Week, and I picked this up. I haven't had a chance to read it all yet, but I have come across surahs that are highly questionable. This is Surah 8, 12. In this version it's on page 230. I'll show you properly afterwards. When your Lord inspired to the angels, I am with you, so strengthen those who have believed. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who have disbelieved, so strike them upon their necks and strike from them every fingertip. That is because they opposed Allah and His Messenger, and whoever opposes Allah and His Messenger, indeed Allah is severe in penalty. Now this is one of many surahs that are highly questionable in their content. Now no doubt the Muslim response to that would be, oh, you're misinterpreting it. Now how does any level-headed person misinterpret that? Unless the English translation is wrong, that is what it says. And if the English translation is wrong, then I doubt that book would have been published, because it would be seen as blasphemous. So that we have to take that literally. So when moderate Muslims turn around and say that Islamists have nothing to do with Islam, clearly they're ignoring the fact that these people are being influenced by violent surahs like that. What else are they being influenced by? Yeah, you could say it's jihad videos and propaganda of exposing how terrible the West is and so on. But Islamists don't just come out of the blue. They're influenced, they're educated in a very negative way, but these people don't just emerge out of nowhere and suddenly become Islamists. There's background to that. And like any, you could say it's like gang members. They come from poor backgrounds. They're ignorant. You can make lots of excuses, but it's notable actually that a lot of Islamists who have been apprehended in recent years have actually been role model members of society. We're not talking here about petty criminals. It might be true in some cases, but in many cases these people are in every other respect not only normal citizens but decent citizens. Many of them do charity work, many of them have regular jobs. So the idea that these people just come out of the blue like that is misleading. I mean, I saw an interview on France 24. One of the attackers in the Paris case, his neighbour said that he seemed like a good guy. He was always helping out the disabled. So I believe that with Islamists there is a Jekyll and Hyde personality. I believe one side of them leads a normal life, the other side is sadistic, thuggish killers who are brainwashed by their own interpretation of Islam. But that is just the point. It is an interpretation of Islam. And I am so fed up of apologists saying that these people have nothing to do with Islam. I believe that is a big part of the problem. In fact, I would go so far as to say it is a bigger problem than the Islamists themselves. The Islamists are so brainwashed, it's a waste of trying to get through to them. Although I'm not saying I don't support measures to try and de-radicalise, but I believe a greater problem actually is widespread denial. And this isn't just the case within Islam. In any example in history where you have had violence and terror, there's always been people willing to make excuses for it. If I was to make an analogy, let's look at China. Look at the absolute hell that was unleashed in the 1960s in the Cultural Revolution. Today in China there's still millions of people who make excuses for that. So, and that doesn't mean they're bad people, it doesn't mean they're sadistic, evil people. It just means that they're stubborn and they're not accepting the facts. Likewise, most Muslims are decent people, they're not bad people, but in my opinion, they're stubbornly denying facts. So where to go from here? I think the first thing has to be truth. Basic, simple, pure truth. And the truth is that within Islam, there is this poisonous ideology of Islamism. It's not disconnected. It's not. So let's stop pretending that it is. And my message to Muslims who hate the likes of Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram and so on, it's good that you share everyone else's disgust at what they do. But if you're saying they have nothing to do with Islam, you're basically being an apologist for them, because you're not recognizing the fact that they have been influenced by something within Islam. So I really do believe that the denials are a big part of the problem. Now, there's a human factor here. If I was a Muslim, I would want nothing to do with these people. But it doesn't mean that the problem's going to go away, and blaming the media is an utter cop-out. I think it's phony, I think it's rubbish. There is no Islamophobia in the media, or very little, because most of what the media reports is simple. In this regard, it's simply reporting the facts. If there is an Islamist attack, it's an Islamist attack. That's what it is. You can't blame the media and say, oh, it's the media trying to make Islam look bad. Instead of being concerned about how your religion looks, how about being concerned for the victims? Because you say you condemn the attack, and yet you're blaming the media, and you're blaming external forces, external actors. So I believe that Islamism, of course, is a problem, but I do believe it goes deeper, because there are a lot of people out there who will condemn terrorist attacks in the name of Islam, but many of those same people would have no problem with Sharia law. So the fact remains, within Islam, and within Islamic law, across the world, there's massive human rights abuses. This goes without question. And a lot of Islamic practices, frankly, don't belong in the modern world. Now, the counter to that, of course, would be, well, look at what Islam has produced. The abacus, great universities, seats of learning, great cities, etc. And I have no doubt that as a major Abrahamic religion, there has been many positive things from Islam. I have no doubt about that. And I have no problem with Muslims stating those things. But what I do have a problem with is Muslims denying the darker side of Islam, saying things like Islam is perfect. Who in their right mind is going to buy that? I believe the only people who would actually believe that are Muslims and liberal apologists for this problem. I believe everyone else with a rational mindset will understand and accept that there is a problem within Islam. And again, I think it is important to differentiate between hating a religion, which I support. I don't hate it myself, but I support others' right to do so, and hating individuals. Now, if people were to come out and say, oh, we should target all Muslims because of the actions of Islamists, that would be wrong. It would be, in many cases, it would be racist. But I really think now is the time that democracies, secular democracies, really stand up and speak out about this problem. So when world leaders condemn what happened in Paris, well, they should have said, we condemn this Islamist attack. Let's stop pretending that these incidents and what happened in Paris is a blip in the ocean of blood spilt by Islamists. In fact, on the same day, there was 38 people killed in Sana'a in Yemen. That got hardly any attention, because Yemen's a very troubled country, and it's sadly a regular occurrence there. But the sheer volume of bloodshed that occurs in Islamic countries is phenomenal. And this is the ironic and tragic thing. The vast majority of victims of Islamism are Muslims, just like the vast majority of victims of Chairman Mao were Chinese citizens. And the reason I keep making that analogy is because it's similar sort of apologia, although even that doesn't have this deeply entrenched, brainwashed sort of mindset, at least not today. Within Islam there is massive denial. Now this is not universal. To be fair, there are Muslims who do speak out, bravely in my opinion, and who do say that we have a problem within Islam and we need to do something about this. I'm thinking of the Quilliam Foundation, I'm thinking of British Muslims for Secular Democracy. I have huge respect for their work, which is why I support that group. And incidentally, the reason I don't support the likes of the EDL is twofold. One, they do have far-right connections, and I have no interest in having any allegiance whatsoever with former white supremacists. Doesn't matter how much their image has changed. The problem with the likes of the EDL is it's not just about opposing Islam, which I think is fine. It's about collective punishment of all Muslims, which I think is not fine. And that is a crucial line that they cross, which is why I want nothing to do with them. I'm not making this video to try and provoke or anger Muslims who are watching. In fact, if you are a reasonable Muslim person, you would be objective and listen to what I'm saying. You wouldn't have to agree with me, but you'd at least listen. If you're not objective, you just say I'm an apostate and I can go and fuck myself. And my message would be, good, you can go fuck yourself as well. Because I believe that any of us in free societies who believe in the principles that I'm talking about here need to speak out. We have to stop being so scared of this. And we have to stop being scared that we'll be accused of racism or Islamophobia, a phony term. Incidentally, I say that's a phony term because I honestly believe it is used to stifle legitimate criticism of the religion of Islam. I do believe there is anti-Muslim prejudice. By that I mean, I think there are ignorant people out there who tar all Muslims with the same brush. Now that's ridiculous, obviously. But it's not ridiculous to criticise Islam, not at all. I think it's very practical to criticise Islam or Christianity or any other religion. The final point I would make is this. Muslims need to accept that what I quoted there is just one surah, and the Quran is full of them. Stop pretending this is just spiritual metaphors. This is literal. If anyone with a brain would read that literally, and if it's not meant literally, it's still dangerous, because impressionable young Muslims who might be in a radicalized environment will take that literally, and hate preachers will point to them and say, look what the Holy Book says, you go out and do that. There's those three Islamists who attacked the officers in Paris. They didn't come out of thin air. They were gradually radicalized. And this is something that we need to accept. And I believe part of the anti-radicalism approach should first of all be publicly acknowledging that there is a problem. And I still think too many Western governments will not do this. President Hollande, I didn't hear him mention Islamism once. And you know, I'm not attacking a man whose country is just being attacked, but I'm just saying that he needs to be responsible. So does David Cameron, so does Angela Merkel, so does Barack Obama, so does Stephen Harper, so does every leader in every country who believes in secular democracy and freedom. They need to be consistent and honest about this problem. Of course there will be reactionaries who will say, oh, the Western leaders are Islamophobic. But when you consider what happens in Islamic countries and the utter intolerance that exists in those countries, and when you consider barbaric blasphemy laws in Pakistan and elsewhere, this is a time when we need to be standing up for our values, not being shrinking violets. Now all the leaders have said we need to stand up for freedom and so on. That's great rhetoric, but they need to include a recognition of the problem as well. This isn't just terrorism. That's naive. It's ideologically driven terrorism. And I do commend France for taking a harder approach to this than we have. Some will say, oh, well, look at what's happened. So there will be apologists who will try to blame the French state, maybe because of the niqab ban, and there will be others who say that it's. I've even seen shamefully some media outlets even talk about Charlie Hebdo's controversial history and so on, almost victim blaming. I think that's despicable. Freedom of expression, incidentally, includes the right to criticise magazines. So I'm not saying Muslims can't be critical of publications. They can. That's part of freedom of expression. And I support Muslims' right to also voice an opinion against a Western government or against a Western publication. But that's stopped short of trying to impose Islamic law. And certainly, sure as hell fall short of a terrorist attack. Those who are trying to make a moral equivalency between Charlie Hebdo publishing Muhammad cartoons and this bloody massacre, the idea that that is somehow a moral equivalent is absurd, utterly absurd. Anyway, I've talked for quite a long time now. I really hope this uploads. I hope the bandwidth doesn't go. I hope it uploads. Yeah. Thanks for watching.